Hi. Next week, we're going to start looking at your books. And if you don't have a book, we'll get you one by next week, I promise. But the first thing I wanted to do before we did that was look at the roadmap and some of the symbols of what you see when you're looking at music. So the first thing we're going to talk about are clefs. If you can imagine a piano keyboard, 88 keys, the clefs kind of indicate which side of the piano you would be playing on, or the range of the notes. So there's the higher side, and then there's the lower side. So the first one is the treble clef. The treble clef is all of the notes that are going to be on that higher side of the keyboard, so the higher in pitch notes. It's used by instruments like the flute, the clarinet, the saxophone, the oboe, the trumpets, the French horn, and mallet instruments. And it's probably something you've seen before. The treble clef is also referred to as the G clef because that swirly part in the middle there goes around G, the note G, which we'll talk about in a little while. Another clef is called the bass clef. It's used by bassoon, trombone, euphonium, tuba, and timpani. And if you can imagine, if the treble clef is the upper part of the keyboard, the bass clef is going to be the lower part of the keyboard. So it's used by the bigger instruments that make lower sounds. It's referred to as the F clef for the same reason as the treble clef is the G clef, and that's because the round part of the clef goes around the note F. The 5 lines that you see music on is called a staff. So it's made up of 5 lines and 4 spaces. Each one of those lines and spaces indicates a different pitch. So we always count up from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. The only instrument that doesn't necessarily use a staff like this is the snare drum, and the snare drum only has 1 line. Sometimes also percussion will use more lines than 1 line, but it'll indicate different instruments instead of different pitches. If you see a line like this in the middle of the staff, it's a bar line, which means it's dividing the music up into measures. And measures are ways for us to organize notes into smaller chunks so that our brains can work on them easier. So this is what a measure looks like. You'll see the distance between 2 bar lines. What's in between them is where we put our notes, and that's called a measure. A final bar line looks like this. It's got a thick end to it and an extra little guy there. And what that means is it's the end of the song, so you stop. A lot of times when you get really good at music, you're going to have multiple pages, and if there's no final bar line, you know you keep going and turning the page. This is how you know when to stop. So like I mentioned earlier, each line and space has a name. We use the first 7 letters of the alphabet. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And this repeats forever and ever and ever. And it always goes the same direction. So we're going to put them in alphabetical order going from lowest to highest. As you can see, this is called a grand staff. So it has the bass clef and the treble clef, and it goes from low to high. And it goes in alphabetical order: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, on and on forever. There's also pitches that go below this bass clef staff and that go above the treble clef staff. And they go on forever and ever and ever. There's an infinite number of pitches. We sometimes can't hear all of those pitches that are way high or those pitches that are way low, but they do exist. And they do have these letter names as well. So if you notice, I said it goes in alphabetical order going from low to high, but it also goes in reverse alphabetical order going from high to low. So G, F, E, D, C, B, A. So it's really important, and this is something you should practice, being able to say those first 7 letters of the alphabet forward and backward. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Let's try going forward together. Ready? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Great. Easy peasy. Let's go fast. 1, 2, ready, go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Good. Now let's try going backwards. You can look at the slide to help you if you want to. Ready, go. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Good. Let's try going a little faster. Ready, go. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. A little faster. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Soon you're going to want to practice it so much that you can say it forwards and backwards so that it's really easy to find notes. Because if you can find one note, if you can remember, for instance, that this bottom space is F, you'll be able to figure it out because you can just go F, G, A, B, C, correct? Also, something to notice, this note C is called middle C, and they're on top of each other because they're actually the same note on the piano. There's all this space here because that's what makes it easier to read when you're reading music like this, but this is actually the same pitch. So this note is where the treble clef and the bass clef connect. When you go to those infinite number of notes that I talked about above and below the staff, we use these little baby lines called ledger lines, and they can go above or below. If you play clarinet, you're going to see these ledger lines sooner. In trumpet, you'll see a couple too. And if you play flute, you're going to see the upper ledger lines sooner as well. So basically the way it works is you would just keep going. So this top space is G in treble clef. So that next line would be A, then B, then C, and so on forever and ever. Same thing down here. The bottom space is D, then the line below that would be C, and then B, and then A. And the bass clef notes are different, but it would be the same idea. You would just use your alphabet to figure out the notes. This is called a flat. And in music, a flat means we're going to lower the pitch. So a flat lowers the pitch by a half step. Flats can appear in a key signature, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or it can be written right before the note, and that's called an accidental. This one is called a sharp. It's not a hashtag, I promise. Hashtags actually lean the other way. And in music, a sharp means to raise the pitch by a half step. So sharps also can appear in a key signature or written before the note as an accidental. Both the sharps and the flats are going to be mostly your black keys on the piano. Not always, there's like a couple exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, they'll be the black keys on the piano. This one is called a natural. It's a little different than your sharp, if you can kind of see. And in music notation, a natural cancels a sharp or a flat, so it just makes it regular, just like the note F. And these are the white keys on your piano. All white keys are natural notes. And it can either cancel an accidental, or it can also change a note from the key signature to make it a little more interesting. So this is the key signature that I was talking about. You'll find the sharps and flats at the very beginning of the song, right next to the clef, okay? And what a key signature does is it tells us what notes we're going to use to play for the entire scale. So we know which notes are going to be natural and which notes are going to be flat. If there's a flat on the line or space of that pitch, that means that all of the notes in the whole piece are going to be flat. Same thing with sharp. If this was sharp, if it was on the line or the space, we can tell if it's on a line or a space because of where the line goes. So it goes through the middle of the flat or the middle of the sharp. So in this case, you have a B flat and an E flat, which means that in that song, all of those notes are going to be B flat and E flat. And the reason why that matters is because the fingering is going to be different for a B flat than a B natural. An E flat fingering is going to be different than an E natural, and the pitches are also going to be different. So if you don't play B flat or E flat, it's going to sound wrong and really weird, okay? So each key signature indicates a pattern of fingerings that we will use for a song. So we're going to practice scales over time. Starting now in 5th grade, you'll learn a little mini scale. And then as you get older and better at your instrument, eventually you'll be able to learn 12 different scales for major and 12 different scales for minor that we use in band music. And it will, and once you learn all those, you get really good at being able to what we call sight read, which means the first read of music, you can play it like you've been practicing it forever and ever and ever. This is called a quarter note. You might know it as a ta from elementary music, but when you get into band, you get to learn the big kid names and the big kid ways of counting. So quarter note gets one beat or count in the music. So if you're snapping along, those are all quarter notes. So in elementary music, you would count it like ta, 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 ta. In band, you're going to count it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to count all of those notes. And that's in 4/4 time. This is a quarter rest. It means the same thing, except for instead of making sound, it's silence. It also takes up 1 beat of time. This is called a time signature, okay? So it's the stacked numbers at the very beginning of the piece next to your key signature, which isn't on here right now, and your clef, okay? It tells you the meter. So what a meter is it's the feeling of the music. So is it a march? Is it a waltz? Is it lilty? Is it straightforward? That's kind of what meter means. So this particular one is 4/4 time. The top number tells you how many beats are in a measure. So in this case, 4 beats will be in a measure every time. And the bottom number is going to tell you what kind of note gets the beat. And that means a 4 means a quarter note gets the beat. So what this is saying is that 4 quarter notes are in every single measure. So the equivalent of 4 quarter notes are going to be in a measure. A time signature tells you how the music is counted, and it's written at the beginning every time. You can change time signatures too, and we'll talk about that when you get better at your instrument. So here's what like a normal piece of music would look like. You have your clef, you have your key signature, you have your time signature. Those are quarter notes. There's 4 of them in that measure. There's your bar line to say we're starting a new measure. There's 2 more quarter notes, 2 quarter rests to make 4, and then your final bar line says that it is done. Also, if you notice, these are all B flats because there's a flat in the key signature. If there wasn't this flat here, these would be B naturals. So for instance, this one here is an A natural because there's no A flat in the key signature. Like I said before, snare drum music is the only one that has only one line on its staff, and it doesn't have a key signature because it doesn't have pitches. So snare drum is unpitched. And so you're just going to see the rhythm, but you will still have, so you don't have a clef, you don't have a key signature, but you do have your time signature so that you know how many beats, and then you'll have all of your notes too. I hope that makes sense to you. The next thing you're going to want to do is go over to the Google form and fill in the quiz so that I know that you understand all of this stuff. Hopefully most of it was review, and now you're ready to start learning how to read real music.